Last time I answered the question, do coaches need to be high elo? If you didn't watch that, the short answer is no. It doesn't matter where you picked up the knowledge for coaching. Just if you're low elo, you have to be aware that you'll come up against some extra resistance from players or organisations early on in your career. But now, the much more important follow-on question. Do coaches need to know a lot about the game? Do they need to know more than their players? High elo, low elo, former pro or traditionally trained coach, we all can learn something from considering this question. Again, the simple answer is no. Let's go back to that definition of coaching from before. Coaching is helping another person improve. Helping being the key word. Coaching is not the same as teaching, although teaching is a part of it. It is helping the team learn. If you had to know more than the player that you're working with, then good luck to Peter Nielsen, who's been working with the greatest chess player of all time for the last 10 years. In fact, good luck to any coach who's been working with the same player for multiple years. If you still have more game knowledge than a player you've been working with for a decade, then I think you haven't really been a very effective coach. So you don't need to know more than your players, but surely you still need to know a lot about the game. Well, yes and no. While game knowledge is helpful, and more game knowledge is even more helpful, the same logic applies. There are many ways a coach can provide value to a team, and many tools can be used to draw information out from a player. These are often much more effective than simply telling. The basic rule is, it's always better if the person you're coaching says the thing that you were going to say to them back to you as their own realization, as their own idea. So in theory, you don't need to know a lot about the game to be a good coach. With that being said, anyone who's coached in practice will know that there's more to it than that. This is because trust is crucial in coaching. You need at least some level of trust for things to work. You'll start with a base level of trust from things like CV, ELO, and most importantly, your perceived level of knowledge about the game. But that's just a starting point. A perception that players have of you before you've had a single interaction. What's much more important to your success is what are you going to build that trust on during your time together. There's a story about CV Max when he first started coaching Griffin. He comes into the gaming house and challenges them all to a one-on-one. He beats everyone. Then he stands there saying, "I know more than you," and he's on trial for 2 hours as they ask him questions about the game until everyone is convinced. It's a great story, but it's a really ineffective approach for a coach. It's great if it works. That's a good way to build a lot of trust in a really short amount of time. But what if he loses? Even just one game. If CV Max loses to Chovy, is he suddenly a worse coach? Should Chovy be the coach? He isn't a better coach because he wins, and he isn't a worse coach if he loses. High elo or not, skilled or not, don't build trust on your abilities within the server. They don't matter. The same is true for game knowledge. I've seen so many coaches who think that the way to be effective is to be 100% sure about all the little details of the game. One of the reasons this happens is because we see it a lot from streamers. But they're entertainers, and being 100% confident is great when you're trying to build an audience. It's best for you as a streamer if everyone watching you thinks that everyone else is wrong. So they stick with you, you create your own little cult around the way you see the game, and they stay with your stream. But it's a completely unnecessary gamble for a coach. You cannot always be right about the game. There are too many variables and the game changes too fast. So what happens when you make a mistake? Players can easily lose trust in their coach in this kind of situation. When you hear about this happening, it's often much more to do with the coach than the player. If you position the value you bring to a team purely on knowing things about the game that they don't, then what happens to that value, and therefore you, when you make a mistake? You need to think about what you bring to a team. Do you provide direction and leadership? Can you create a high-performance environment? Are you good at leading discussions, or managing conflict, or drawing information out from players? By all means, be confident with what you know. Be confident in your way of seeing the game. But don't stake your entire reputation on game knowledge, on all the tiny little details. That's building your house on sand. You need to find something more consistent and more solid, and you'll be much more effective in the long term.